Welcome to this edition of Fuel for Thought. I'm your host, Guido Vildozo, Associate Director of Consulting at S&P Global Mobility. In this episode, we're shining a light on the complexities of carbon emission reporting. As original equipment manufacturers navigate new regulations in Europe and California, the importance of accurate carbon reporting has never been more pronounced. Joining me today is Qifan Yang, Lead Research Analyst at S&P Global Mobility. Qifan will shed light on the challenges of tracking carbon emissions, particularly Scope 3 or use phase emissions, and the opportunities for standardization and transparency in reporting practices. From geographic discrepancies to vehicle type variations, we will explore how OEMs can pave the way for a more sustainable automotive landscape. Welcome, Qifan, and let's jump in. Would you please give us some background on the regulatory measures enacted in 2024 and their significance for OEMs?
Yeah, thanks. Sure, thanks, Guido. It's fascinating to see how the global landscape is evolving when it comes to carbon disclosure, especially in the major markets of European Union, the United States, and mainland China. So to start with, in EU, we are seeing the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD, really pushing the envelope by requiring companies to report not just their direct emissions, but also the broader Scope 3 emissions. And this is part of a broader move towards a double materiality approach, where a company needs to consider both the environmental and financial impacts. In addition, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, or CSDDD, also adds another layer, urging companies to align their plans with the Paris Agreement, which is crucial for Scope 3 emission targets. Moving over to the US, while the Securities Exchange Commission might have left Scope 3 out of its final climate risk disclosure rules, there's still a significant drive from investors and state-level legislations, like the California Climate Corporate Data Accountability Act, aka SB 253. This act is a game changer. It requires companies with over $1 billion in revenue to start to disclose the Scope 3 emission by the year of 2026, which really emphasizes the growing importance of transparency in emission reporting. Last but not least, meanwhile in China, the three major stock exchanges are also stepping up with new sustainability reporting guidelines, and starting in 2026, large companies and those dual listed in China will need to disclose a broader range of ESG topics, including mandatory Scope 3 greenhouse gas emission. And all these moves mark a significant focus on emission transparencies. So for OEMs, these regulations are pivotal. They underscore the need for enhanced transparency, especially in reporting Scope 3 emissions, which often make up the largest part of their carbon footprint. There's also a push for standardized and consistent reporting methodologies, which is crucial for meeting both investor and regulatory expectations. So by aligning these regulations, OEMs can strategically position themselves to meet decarbonization goals, build stakeholder trust, and stay competitive in a market that's increasingly focused on sustainability.
Qifan, as far as Scope 3, how do these regulations relate to it? And what does that necessarily mean?
Yeah, so before we dive into what does it mean to OEMs, let's talk about what is Scope 3 emissions. According to Greenhouse Gas Protocol, greenhouse emissions are indirect emissions that occur throughout a company's value chain, either upstream or downstream. And this includes emissions from the suppliers, such as purchase of goods and services, or the use of sold products and waste disposal. So specifically for automotive industry, the use of sold products, or Scope 3 Category 11 emissions, constitutes the largest share of their total carbon footprint, which can account for 75 to 80% of their total emissions for most OEMs. So you can see why these emissions are such a big deal. They are not just a small piece of the puzzle, they are the lion's share of it. So for car manufacturers, this means that emissions from the vehicle they sell when people are actually driving them, are the biggest contributors to their overall carbon footprint. It's like the elephant in the room that everyone needs to address. And with regulation tightening up, there is really a push for transparency and accuracy in how these emissions are reported. It's not just about ticking a box for compliance, it's about generally understanding and reducing the environmental impact. This focus on Scope 3 emission is crucial because it aligns with broader sustainability goals and help OEMs to stay competitive in a market that is increasingly driven by eco-conscious consumers and investors. So tackling this emission heads-on is not just good for the planet, it's smart business too.
Thank you for the insight. What are the primary challenges that OEMs face when it comes to tracking and measuring Scope 3 emissions, Category 11?
For sure. So let's delve into some of the primary challenges that OEMs are facing when it comes to tracking and measuring Scope 3 emissions. So one of the biggest hurdle is the inconsistency in reporting methodologies. Different companies use various approaches to calculate emissions, and this can lead to significant discrepancies. For example, whether or not well-to-tank or WTT emissions are included can really skew the data, making it tough for companies to compare across the industry. Next, geographic variation adds another layer of complexity. OEMs often focus on specific markets, which are influenced by local regulations, fuel type, and driving conditions. So you might find that regions with stricter laws report lower emissions, while less regulated areas show higher numbers. So this variation can really complicate efforts to make industry-wide comparison. Then there is the issue of vehicle lifespan assumptions. The total emission reported can vary significantly depending on the assumed mileage of a vehicle's lifespan. For example, if one OEM assumes a vehicle can last 150,000 kilometers, they will report a lower emission comparing to another company that assumes a lifespan of 200,000 kilometers or more. And this makes a direct comparison quite challenging. The diversity of vehicle types covered in emission reporting also poses challenges. Some OEMs might include passenger cars, light commercial vehicles, or medium-heavy commercial vehicles, where others might also report emissions from motorcycles, aircraft, or power products. This range makes it difficult to accurately compare peers within the automotive sectors alone. Lastly, the reliability and comparability of the reported data are often impacted by the granularity of vehicle efficiency and energy consumption data, which can come from a variety of vendors. And this variability can affect the accuracy of emission reporting and hinder efforts to establish industry benchmarks. So all these challenges really highlights the need for a standardized methodologies and clearer guidelines. So it's crucial for OEMs to address these issues to ensure accurate and comparable emission reporting, which is essential for meeting regulatory requirements and achieving their sustainability goals.
Let's expand on this a little bit more. You mentioned that Scope 3 Category 11 emissions can account for 75 to 80% of an automaker's total carbon footprint. Why is the accurate reporting in this area so critical for the automotive industry?
Yeah, as you already mentioned in the question, Scope 3 Category 11 emissions are a big deal because they make up the lion's share of an OEM's carbon footprint. Therefore, a tiny variation in reporting could mean millions of tons of CO2 misreported. From the OEM's perspective, getting this number right is crucial. It helps them truly understand their environmental impact and pinpoint where they can make improvements. Plus, having accurate data is key to setting realistic decarbonization targets and crafting strategies to meet them. It's like having a clear roadmap for making their operation more sustainable. And let's not just forget, in a market that's increasingly focused on eco-friendly practices, being transparent about emission can give OEMs a real competitive edge. It's not just about doing what's good, it's about staying ahead of the game. And on the flip side, from the viewpoint of regulations, investors, and consumers, accurate reporting is equally important. Regulations like those in the EU and California are getting stricter, and OEMs need to comply to avoid penalties and keep their operation running smoothly. Investors are also keeping a closer eye on the sustainability efforts, expecting companies to show genuine commitment to reducing emissions. Accurate reporting builds trust and enhances an OEM's reputation. And for consumers who are becoming more eco-conscious, knowing that companies is serious about its environmental responsibility can be a big draw. It's all about aligning with market demand and showing that you are part of the solution, not the problem.
Let's dig in a little deeper. Could you please elaborate on how geographic scope impacts this carbon reporting and the discrepancies that arise from different regional regulations?
Sure, of course. So the geographic scope of emission data significantly influences carbon reporting within the automotive industry, primarily due to varying regional regulations, fuel type, and the driving conditions. And these factors contribute to notable discrepancies in emission reported by OEMs. For example, OEMs reporting in regions with stringent environmental laws, such as part of the Europe or North American, often report lower emission due to the availability to cleaner energy sources and more efficient driving habits. Conversely, in less regulated regions, emissions tend to be higher, often attributed to local fuel types and driving conditions that are less efficient or more polluting. When we research the top 10 automakers, each operates in multiple markets worldwide. Yet their emission data can vary widely based on the specific region they focused on. And this variability poses a challenge for stakeholders who wish to compare emissions across different companies and regions effectively. The lack of consistency in how emissions are reported across geographic areas can create a misleading picture of an automaker's overall environmental impact. And adding to the complexity, the different emission test cycles used across regions, such as the WLTP cycles in EU, the EPA standards in the US, and the CLTC in China. And each of these test cycles has its own methodology and criteria for measuring emissions, which OEMs must strictly monitor and adhere to. So this region-specific regulation requires OEMs to tailor their reporting and compliance strategy accordingly, further complicating efforts to standardize emission data globally. To address this challenge and reduce confusion, having standardized methodology and a clearer guideline across region is critical. And such standard would enhance the credibility of emission disclosure and allow for more meaningful comparison across industry.
Qifan, in your recent article, you discussed the complexity of vehicle types included in emission calculations. How do these variations affect the comparability of emission data across different OEMs?
Yep, great question. The variety of vehicle type included in emission calculation really adds a layer of complexity when it comes to comparing emission data across different OEMs. Automakers have a different approach to what they include in their emission reporting. Some might focus solely on passenger cars, while others might expand their scope to include light commercial vehicles, motorcycles, or even specialized vehicles such as aircraft or power products. And this inconsistency can make it quite a challenge to draw direct comparison between companies. So for instance, we look into one major OEM that reports emission across a broad range of products, including motorcycles and power equipment. And these comprehensive scopes make it difficult to compare its emission with those of other manufacturers that might only report on passenger vehicles. It's like trying to compare apple to orange if you are only interested in the light vehicle segment. Similarly, another OEM recently adjusted its reporting methodology to include company cars in its emission calculations, and this change led to a noticeable increase in their reported emissions. Variations such like these in reporting practice can skew the data, potentially leading to misinterpretations of automakers' environmental performance. So overall, this difference in what gets reported can make it tricky for stakeholders to make accurate apple-to-apple comparison across the industry. And this highlights the need for more standardized reporting practice to ensure that emission data is both consistent and comparable.
What role do automaker assumptions about vehicle lifetime mileage and well-to-tank factors play in emissions reporting inconsistencies?
Yeah, so let's talk about how assumptions around vehicle lifetime mileage as well-to-tank or WTT factors can really shake up emission reporting in the automotive industry. And before we dig into that, I want to remind everyone that these two assumptions are just two of the lot of assumptions that make up the entire methodology. So these assumptions can lead to a big variations in the data and making it tough to compare numbers directly between companies. Let's start with vehicle lifetime mileage. Different automakers have different ideas about how long a vehicle will be on the road, and this directly affects the total emissions they reported. For example, if one automaker assumes the vehicle will last 150,000 kilometers, they end up reporting lower emission comparing to another company that assume 200,000 kilometers or more. The longer the assumed lifespan, the more the emissions are spread out, making the vehicle seem more efficient. And this difference in assumption can really skew the data, complicating comparison across different manufacturers. Now let's talk about the wear-to-tank factors. So wear-to-tank factors covers emission from producing and delivering the fuel or electricity that powers the vehicle. Some automakers might leave this emission out, focusing only on what's coming out of the tailpipe. But if you skip the wear-to-tank emissions, you are not getting the full picture of a vehicle's carbon footprint, and this can distort the real environmental impact of a company's products and mislead stakeholders about its decarbonization efforts. So by not consistently accounting for these factors, automakers risk providing an incomplete or inaccurate view of their environmental impact. To tackle these inconsistencies, it's crucial to adopt a standardized methodologies. And this means including comprehensive assumptions about both vehicle lifetime and wear-to-tank factors, along with all the other assumptions, so that we can ensure emission reporting is more transparent, consistent, and comparable across the industry.
This sounds very challenging, Qifan. How can standardized methodologies in carbon reporting benefit OEMs? And what steps can they take to adopt these practices?
Yeah, great questions. Like I said, standardized methodology in carbon reporting offer a host of benefit for OEMs, much like having a consistent set of rules and referees in a sports game. Just as standardized rules ensure fairness and clarity on the playing field, standardized carbon reporting methodology provide consistencies and comparability across automotive industry. This allows OEMs to benchmark their performance against its peers, much like teams comparing their stats against others in the league, to identify areas for improvement. Enhanced transparency is another significant benefit. By adopting standardized practice, OEMs can offer more transparent and reliable emission data, which is crucial for building trust with regulators, investors, and consumers. Moreover, standardized methodology help OEMs align with regulatory requirements, ensuring compliance with evolving emission reporting standards and avoiding potential penalties. And in terms of strategic decision making, consistent data enable OEMs to make informed choice about product development, supply chain management, and sustainability initiatives. So in order to standardize methodology in carbon reporting, OEMs can take the following steps. First, they could align with established framework. OEMs should align their reporting practice with established framework like Greenhouse Gas Protocol and Science-Based Target initiatives, which provide guidelines for consistent emission calculation and reporting. Second, they could utilize comprehensive datasets. Leveraging comprehensive datasets, such as those from S&P Global Mobility, ensuring that emission data is reliable and comparable, offering insights into global car manufacturers' emissions. Thirdly, they could collaborate with industry stakeholders. Engaging with industry stakeholders, including suppliers and regulatory bodies, help OEMs stay informed about best practice and regulatory changes, facilitating the sharing of data and methodologies. Next, they could also invest in data collection and validation. Robust data collection and validation process are crucial for ensuring the accuracy of emission reporting across different regions and vehicle types. Last but not least, they also need to focus on continuous improvement. OEMs should adopt a mindset of continuous improvement, regularly reviewing and updating methodologies in response to new insights and the regulatory changes to maintain accuracy and relevance. So by implementing these steps, can enhance their emission reporting and effectively support their sustainability goals.
Let's expand on this topic a little more, Qifan. What are some of the best practices that you have seen among OEMs that successfully navigate carbon reporting challenges?
So one of the standout practice among OEMs is their commitment to the Science-Based Targets Initiative, or SBTi. By aligning their emission reduction goals with the latest climate science, these companies are not just setting ambitious targets, but are also ensuring that their efforts are in line with global efforts to combat climate change. It's like having a clear science-backed roadmap that guide their sustainability journey. Another key practice is engaging with suppliers. OEMs recognize that a significant portion of their emission comes from their supply chain, so they are working closely with suppliers to ensure they also commit to reducing emissions. The collaboration is crucial because it helps improve data accuracy and foster a culture of sustainability throughout the entire value chain. Lastly, conducting comprehensive life cycle assessment, or LCA, is becoming a norm. By evaluating the environmental impact of their vehicles from production to end of life, OEMs can pinpoint exactly where they can make the most significant improvements. It's about understanding the full picture and making informed decisions that lead to real, impactful changes. Together, these practices are not only helping OEMs navigate the complexity of carbon reporting, but also position them as leaders in the push for a more sustainable automotive industry.
Great points. Looking ahead, what do you envision as the future of carbon reporting in the automotive industry, and how can OEMs prepare for an evolving regulatory expectation?
So looking ahead, the future of carbon reporting in automotive industry is like preparing for a long-distance race. Just as athletes train rigorously to adapt to changing conditions and improving their performance, OEMs need to gear up for evolving regulatory expectations. And the focus will increasingly be on comprehensiveness and transparent emission reporting, particularly for Scope 3 emissions. To prepare, OEMs should invest in robust data system and collaborate closely with their supply chains, much like a relay team working in perfect harmony to ensure a seamless handoff. By aligning with established frameworks and continuously refining their methodologies, OEMs can stay ahead of the curve, ensuring they are not just meeting but exceed future regulatory requirements. This proactive approach will be a key to maintaining competitiveness and building trust with stakeholders in a world that increasingly values sustainability.
Thank you so much, Qifan, for these wonderful insights. The automotive industry is clearly at a critical juncture where accurate carbon reporting is going to be essential for regulatory compliance and corporate responsibility. By addressing challenges such as geographic discrepancies and vehicle type variations through a standard methodology, OEMs can enhance transparency and credibility. Thank you as well to everyone for listening to this month's episode. Please share this podcast link with colleagues and in your social media accounts whenever you can. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn at S&P Global Mobility and explore our products and offerings at spglobal.com/mobility. We'll be back for more Fuel for Thought next month. Have a great day.